You checked someone's life today and decided yours was smaller. Maybe it was a photo. Maybe it was a salary mentioned in passing. Maybe it was the offhand comment about a vacation, a promotion, a new apartment, a relationship that looks nothing like yours. Whatever it was, something tightened in your chest. And then, almost immediately, you felt a little worse about a life that had been perfectly fine 10 minutes earlier. You know this feeling. You probably hate that you know it. And you have almost certainly told yourself to stop doing it. You haven't stopped. You won't stop. And the reason you won't stop is one of the most important things you will ever learn about the brain you are living inside. This is not a character flaw. This is not weakness or insecurity or something that therapy alone can fix. The comparison you just made, the one that made you feel smaller, was not a mistake. It was a system doing exactly what it was designed to do. A system so old, so deeply embedded in your neurology, that it predates the concept of a career, a social media feed, or a self-image by hundreds of thousands of years. Let's go back to where it started. Your ancestors did not live in a world of billions. They lived in a band of 20 to 50 people. Everyone in that group was known to everyone else. You knew who the best hunter was. You knew who healed fastest. You knew whose children were fed and whose were hungry. You knew who had the respect of the group and who was quietly being edged to its margins. And that knowledge, that constant, real-time tracking of everyone around you, was not gossip. It was survival data. Social psychologist Leon Festinger was the first to formally name what you were experiencing. In 1954, he published his social comparison theory, which proposed that human beings have a fundamental drive to evaluate their own opinions, abilities, and standing, and that, in the absence of objective standards, they do this by comparing themselves to other people. Festinger was describing something he observed in mid-century Americans navigating status and ambition. What he did not yet fully understand was how deep the root system went. Because what Festinger mapped as a social phenomenon, evolutionary psychologists would later trace all the way back to the savannah. In a small band, knowing your rank mattered. It determined who got the best food, who got the most protection, who survived a lean winter and who did not. Your brain evolved to run a constant, automatic status calculation, not because it was cruel, but because in the environment your ancestors occupied, your position in the group was one of the most accurate predictors of whether you would live or die. You are still running that calculation every single day without choosing to. But here is where it gets complicated. Your brain did not evolve to compare you to 7 billion strangers. It evolved to compare you to the 40 or so people you could physically see and interact with. For most of human history, that meant your comparison pool was realistic. The best hunter in your band was genuinely the best you would ever encounter. The most respected elder was genuinely operating at the ceiling of what your world contained. The comparison produced accurate information about where you stood in the only world that existed for you. Now your comparison pool is theoretically infinite, and it is curated. What you see when you scroll is not a random sample of humanity. It is the deliberate presentation of peaks. The vacation photo was not a Wednesday morning. The promotion announcement was not the 3 years of quiet grinding that preceded it. The relationship that looks effortless was captured in a single golden hour, not during the argument that happened 2 days before. Your brain, running ancient comparison software on modern inputs, is measuring your ordinary Tuesday against everyone else's extraordinary moment. And it keeps losing, not because your life is small, but because the game has been rigged from the start. Researcher Sonja Lyubomirsky, a psychologist at the University of California, Riverside, who has spent decades studying the science of happiness, has shown that chronic upward social comparison, comparing yourself to people who appear to be doing better, is one of the most consistent predictors of dissatisfaction, low self-esteem, and depression. The direction matters enormously. Compare upward and you almost always feel worse. Compare downward to someone who appears to be struggling and you briefly feel better, which explains why misery tends to find company and why some people spend years consuming content that confirms how difficult someone else's life is. Neither direction is actually feeding you. Both are just the ancient system misfiring in a world it was never built for. Now consider what actually happens inside your brain when you make a comparison. Neuroimaging research has shown that social comparisons activate the ventral striatum, a region associated with reward processing, and the anterior cingulate cortex, which handles conflict detection and emotional regulation. When you come out ahead in a comparison, the ventral striatum lights up. It feels good. Briefly, chemically, genuinely good. When you come out behind, the anterior cingulate flags a discrepancy, a gap between where you are and where the social signal tells you that you should be. That gap produces something that feels like anxiety. It also produces motivation. This is the part that makes the comparison impulse so hard to shut off. It is not purely destructive. In the right dose, in the right context, comparing yourself to someone slightly ahead of you is one of the most powerful drivers your brain possesses. Psychologist Penelope Lockwood at the University of Toronto has studied what she calls the role model effect, the phenomenon where comparing yourself to an achievable, relatable model of success actually accelerates your own progress. The key word is relatable. If the person you are comparing yourself to feels genuinely within reach, your brain reads the gap as a solvable problem. It gets to work. But if the gap feels impossible, if the comparison is so distant from your current life that no plausible path connects them, your brain does not get inspired. It reads the distance as a threat, and threatened brains do not expand, they contract. This is why comparison so often feels like quicksand. The impulse to measure yourself against others is real and ancient and sometimes useful, but the inputs you are feeding it are almost never realistic, and they are almost never kind. There is something else your ancestors' comparison system was built to do that rarely gets discussed. It was not just about measuring your own status, it was about reading the group. Noticing who was becoming more capable, who was weakening, who was forming alliances, who was beginning to pull away. In a world without any written record, your ongoing social comparison was your only map of the shifting terrain of the relationships you depended on. The comparison was a form of relational intelligence. It kept you embedded in the web of people who kept you alive. What that means is that you were never supposed to compare and withdraw. You were supposed to compare and engage, to notice, to adjust, to move toward. The ancient system was designed to draw you closer to the people you measured yourself against, not to make you perform a version of yourself for an invisible audience of strangers. When comparison pulls you away from people, when it makes you perform instead of connect, curate instead of share, hide your actual life because it does not match the standard you have assembled from other people's highlights, it has been hijacked. The tool is still running, but it is no longer doing the job it was built for. It is worth knowing that social comparison is not unique to humans. Primatologist Frans de Waal documented comparison behavior in chimpanzees in studies where two animals received unequal rewards for the same task. The one who received less, a grape versus a cucumber, did not simply accept the imbalance. It rejected the cucumber outright and sometimes threw it back at the researcher. The sense of unfairness was immediate, visceral, and automatic, not taught, not cultural, wired in. You share that response with animals who have no concept of a salary, a follower count, or a career ladder. The comparison reflex runs deeper than language, deeper than civilization, deeper than almost anything else in you. So what do you do with all of this? The comparison will not stop. It was never going to stop. It is as automatic as hunger, or the flinch response, or the pull toward fire in the dark. But knowing what it actually is, knowing that it is an ancient navigational system misfiring on impossible inputs, changes your relationship to it. The next time you feel that tightening in your chest after someone's life appears larger than yours, you are not failing at contentment. You are not weak or ungrateful or fundamentally broken. You are a social animal with a brain designed for a world of 40 people, trying to locate itself inside a comparison pool of 8 billion, filtered through an algorithm built to show you only what performs best. Your ancestors compared themselves to the 40 people they could see and touch and know completely. They compared themselves to people with real flaws, real struggles, real bad days visible up close. You are comparing yourself to a curated highlight reel assembled from billions of best moments. The system was not built for this. It was built for a world small enough to be real. You checked someone's life today and decided yours was smaller, but the math was never fair, and the measurement was never yours to make in the first place.